The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, they looked up at the night sky and wondered what waited for them in the darkness between worlds. When they finally reached out and touched the void, they found they were not alone. The galaxy was old. Ancient civilizations had risen and fallen long before the first human walked on two legs. Empires stretched across thousands of star systems. Wars had burned entire sectors of space into dead zones where nothing lived. The strong ruled. The weak served. This was the way of things. And then came humanity. Admiral Una stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Hope's Light. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind her, the view screen showed the massive station of the Galactic Council. It was a structure so large that moons could fit inside its halls. Ships from 100 different species moved around it like insects around a hive. "They are ready for us, Admiral," said her aide, a young officer named Bin. Una nodded slowly. 300 years, she said quietly. 300 years since first contact, and they still do not understand us. She walked toward the shuttle bay, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. Around her, the crew worked in silence. They knew what today meant. Today was another council session. Today was another chance for the galaxy to mock them. The Galactic Council was made of 12 great powers. Each one controlled hundreds of worlds. Each one had fleets that could darken the skies of any planet. They had fought wars that lasted centuries. They had destroyed species that refused to bow, and they thought humanity was a joke. Una entered the council chamber alone. The room was circular, with seats rising up like the inside of a bowl. Representatives from each major power sat in their designated areas. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had bodies made of crystal or metal or things that had no name in human language. At the center was a speaking platform. Una walked to it and stood there, waiting. "The representative from Earth may speak," announced the council speaker. A tall being with 4 arms and skin like blue stone. Una bowed her head slightly. "Honored members of the council, I come once again to discuss the trade agreements between Earth and the Vexery Empire. Our merchants continue to face unfair treatment. Our ships are stopped without reason. Our people are—" Laughter cut her off. It came from the Vexery section. Their ambassador, a creature covered in black armor like plates, leaned forward. His name was Krath, and he had made it his personal mission to insult humanity at every opportunity. "The humans complain again," Krath said, his voice filled with amusement. "Tell me, soft ones, why do you bother? You have no fleet. You have no weapons worth mentioning. You come to us like beggars asking for scraps." Other representatives joined in the laughter. Even those who did not openly mock humanity looked away with expressions of pity or contempt. Una stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. "We come in peace," she said simply. "We ask only for fair treatment." "Peace," Krath repeated the word like it was something dirty. "You humans speak of peace as if it is something to be proud of. In this galaxy, peace is what the weak call their surrender. You have no power, so you choose peace. It is not a choice. It is an admission of failure." The council chamber buzzed with agreement. Una looked at Krath for a long moment. Something flickered in her eyes, just for a second. It was gone so fast that no one noticed. "Perhaps you are right," she said softly. "Perhaps peace is for the weak." She left the chamber without another word. On her ship, Una sat alone in her quarters. The stars moved past her window as Hope's Light began its journey back to Earth. She pulled up a holographic display and studied it carefully. It showed Earth's military readiness. The true numbers. The ones no other species had ever seen. 2,000 warships, hidden in the dark spaces between stars. Weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. Soldiers trained from birth to fight in any environment. Technology that made the Council's greatest achievements look like children's toys. All of it sleeping. All of it waiting. Una closed the display and looked out at the stars. Humanity had made a choice long ago. When they first met the other species of the galaxy, they saw what endless war had done. They saw the burned worlds, the dead civilizations, the species that existed only as slaves. They saw what power without wisdom created. And they chose differently. They chose to be traitors instead of conquerors. They chose words instead of weapons. They built their strength in secret while showing the galaxy only their gentle face. It was not weakness. It was strategy. General Day understood this better than anyone. He sat in his office on Earth, reviewing the same reports Una had seen. He was an older man with a face marked by old scars. He had fought in Earth's last war, decades ago, before the choice was made. He knew what humanity was capable of. His communicator beeped. A message from Admiral Una. They laughed again. Her voice said simply. Krath was particularly bold today. Day closed his eyes. One day, they will understand. And on that day, Day did not answer. He did not need to. Across the galaxy, on Colony Tan, life continued peacefully. It was a beautiful world of green forests and blue oceans. 50 million humans called it home. Children played in parks while their parents worked in fields and factories. They knew nothing of the Council's mockery. They knew only that they lived in peace, and peace was good. A young woman named Hannah walked through the capital city with her daughter. The little girl pointed at the sky and asked about the stars. Hannah smiled and told her stories about distant worlds and friendly aliens and how humanity had found its place in the great family of the galaxy. She did not know that Vexery warships were already moving toward her world. She did not know that in 3 standard days, her peaceful sky would burn, but the Galactic Council would soon learn a terrible truth. Humanity had not chosen peace because they were weak. They had chosen peace because they knew exactly what they would become if they ever chose war. And war was coming. The attack came without warning. Colony Tan was sleeping when the Vexery fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 30 warships appeared in the sky like dark stars. They did not send messages. They did not make demands. They simply began firing. Hannah was holding her daughter when the first beam struck the city. One moment, they were walking home from the market. The next moment, the world became fire. Buildings fell around them. People screamed and ran, but there was nowhere to run. The beams came from everywhere. Hannah held her daughter close and told her not to be afraid. She lied. She was terrified. But she was a mother, and mothers are brave for their children, even when they cannot be brave for themselves. The last thing she saw was a Vexery ship hovering above them, its weapons glowing with deadly light. Then there was nothing. 50 million people died in 6 hours. The Vexery were thorough. They destroyed every city, every town, every village. They burned the forests and boiled the oceans. When they were finished, Colony Tan was nothing but ash and smoke. Ambassador Krath watched the destruction from his flagship. He smiled his terrible smile. "Send this recording to Earth," he ordered. "Let the soft ones see what happens to those who annoy the Vexery Empire." The message reached Earth 3 days later. General Day was in his office when it arrived. He opened it expecting another trade dispute or diplomatic complaint. Instead, he saw his home world burning. He saw the city where he was born turned to rubble. He saw the faces of people he had known all his life, frozen in their final moments of terror. His wife had been on Colony Tan. His 2 sons, his grandchildren. They watched the entire recording without moving. His face was stone. Only his hand showed any reaction, gripping the edge of his desk so hard that the metal bent beneath his fingers. When it was over, He sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up his communicator and made one call. Gather the War Council. All of them, now. The War Council met in a room that officially did not exist. It was buried deep beneath the mountains of old Korea, in tunnels that had been built centuries ago and improved with each passing generation. Here, surrounded by screens showing data that no outsider had ever seen, the true leaders of humanity's military gathered. Admiral Yuna was there, her face pale with grief and rage. General Day sat at the head of the table, still wearing the same uniform he had worn when he received the message. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had only thought about what must come next. Around them sat 12 other officers, each commanding a secret fleet or weapon system or special force. These were the keepers of humanity's true power. They had spent their lives preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Now it was here. 50 million, they said quietly. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the fire burning beneath the words. 50 million of our people. Men, women, children. Gone in 6 hours. He looked at each officer in turn. The Vexery did this to send a message. They wanted us to know our place. They wanted us to be afraid. Silence filled the room. I will not be afraid, they continued. I will not bow. I will not beg for peace while our people's ashes drift among the stars. He stood and walked to the main display. With a gesture, he brought up the full map of humanity's hidden military assets. Ships appeared across the screen, thousands of them, positioned in places no one had ever looked. Weapon systems capable of destruction on scales the galaxy had never imagined. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for battles they thought they would never fight. 300 years, they said. For 300 years, we held back. We chose peace. We let them mock us, insult us, treat us like nothing. We did this because we believed that peace was better than war. We did this because we did not want to become what they are. He turned to face the council. But there are some things that cannot be forgiven. There are some lines that cannot be crossed. The Vexery have done both. Admiral Yuna spoke. What are you proposing, General? I am proposing that we end this. Not just defeat the Vexery. End them. Destroy their empire so completely that no one in this galaxy ever thinks about attacking humanity again. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the officers nodded. The President will need to approve this, one of them said. The President already knows, they replied. He is preparing to address the galaxy now. On Earth, in the Great Hall of the United Human Government, President Ho stood before cameras that would broadcast his message to every corner of known space. He was a young man, younger than most leaders in human history, but his eyes were old, filled with a sorrow that no one his age should carry. Behind him hung a single image, Colony Tan as it had been, beautiful and alive. People of the galaxy, he began. His voice was steady, but cold. 3 days ago, the Vexery Empire attacked Colony Tan without warning and without cause. 50 million human beings, innocent civilians living peaceful lives, were murdered. He paused to let the words sink in. For 300 years, humanity has sought peace with all species. We have traded fairly. We have resolved disputes with words. We have never raised our hand in aggression against any other civilization. His expression hardened. This peace was our choice. We chose it because we valued life. We chose it because we believed that cooperation was better than conflict. We chose it because we understood something that the rest of this galaxy seems to have forgotten. True strength is not about the power to destroy. It is about the wisdom to build. He leaned forward slightly. But the Vexery have made their choice. They chose murder. They chose cruelty. They chose to kill our children and burn our world to ash. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. but somehow it seemed louder than ever. So now we make a new choice. Behind him, the image of Colony Tan faded. In its place appeared the symbol of the United Human Military, a sword wrapped in chains that were now breaking apart. "We chose peace," President Ho said. "You chose war." He let the words hang in the air. "War you shall have." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and throne rooms and military command centers, beings of 100 different species watched in confusion. Was this a joke? The humans were threatening war? The weak little traders who could barely defend their merchant ships? Ambassador Krath laughed so hard he could barely breathe. "Let them come," he said to his aides. "Let them throw their little ships against our fleet. It will be entertaining." But in dark space, in the void between stars where no one ever looked, something was moving. Thousands of ships were activating systems that had been dormant for decades. Crews were taking their positions. Weapons were coming online. The chains around the sword were breaking, and doom was coming with them. 7 days after President Ho's message, the galaxy learned that humanity had not been joking. Commander Jin stood on the bridge of the battleship Iron Will. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built. 2 kilometers of metal and weapons and engines that could push it faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Around it flew a fleet of 500 vessels, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. And this was just one fleet. There were others. "All ships report ready, Commander," said his second officer, a woman named Mira with sharp eyes and steady hands. Jin nodded. He was a tall man, thin and quiet, with the look of someone who had spent too many years thinking about things he hoped would never happen. Now they were happening, and he felt strangely calm. "Open a channel to all ships," he ordered. His voice went out to every vessel in the fleet. "This is Commander Jin. In 20 minutes, we will exit dark space and enter the Tehran system. This system contains the largest Vexari military base outside their home territory. 800 warships are stationed there. Ground forces number in the millions." He paused. "We will destroy all of it. Every ship, every base, every weapon." The Vexari believed humanity was weak. Today, we correct that mistake. He closed the channel and looked down at the stars. 20 minutes later, the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel directly above the Vexari base. The alien defenders had no time to react. One moment, their sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 500 human warships filled their screens. It should have been impossible. No one could exit FTL travel that close to a planet without crashing into its gravity well. No one could coordinate that many ships with such precision. But humanity had been building these ships in secret for 300 years. They had solved problems the rest of the galaxy did not even know existed. "All ships fire," Jin ordered calmly. The human fleet unleashed its weapons. Beams of concentrated energy sliced through Vexari ships like knives through paper. Missiles carrying payloads of antimatter detonated against their shields and burned through their hulls. Railguns fired projectiles at such speed that they created small explosions. Just from air friction, the Vexari tried to fight back. Their ships were powerful, built for conquest and war. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Human targeting systems found weaknesses in their designs that even their own engineers did not know about. Human shields absorbed attacks that should have vaporized them. Human pilots flew with a skill and coordination that seemed almost supernatural. In 30 minutes, 600 Vexari ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 200 tried to flee. They did not make it. On the surface, the ground battle was even shorter. Human soldiers dropped from orbit in armored pods, hitting the ground already firing. They moved through the Vexari base like ghosts, appearing from shadows and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Their weapons made no sound. but Vexry soldiers fell wherever they went. By the end of the day, the Terran system belonged to humanity. Commander Jin stood in the ruins of the Vexry Command Center. Around him, his soldiers were securing prisoners and gathering intelligence. He looked at the destruction and felt nothing but a cold, quiet satisfaction. "Send a message to Earth," he said. "Terran is ours. Casualties, 0. Across the galaxy, other human fleets were having similar success. In the Kresh sector, Admiral Yuna led her ships against a Vexry supply convoy. 300 transport vessels and their escorts were captured or destroyed in less than an hour. In the Outer Rim, General Tay's ground forces liberated 4 colonies that the Vexry had conquered decades ago, freeing millions of beings who had lived as slaves. The Galactic Council watched in growing horror. "This cannot be real," said the speaker, staring at reports that made no sense. "The humans have no military. We would have known." "They hid it," said another council member, a being of crystal who rarely spoke. "They hid everything. The ships, the weapons, the soldiers. All of it for 300 years. But why? Why pretend to be weak?" No one had an answer. Ambassador Krath was not laughing anymore. He stood in the Vexry Emperor's throne room, trying to explain how the weak little humans had just destroyed the largest military base in his empire. "They cheated," he insisted. "They must have." "There is no way." "Silence," the Emperor said. His voice was like stones grinding together. He was ancient, even by Vexry standards, and he had ruled for centuries by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone around him. Now, for the first time in his long life, he felt something he did not recognize. It was fear. "Show me," he commanded. The screens around the throne room lit up with footage captured from surviving Vexry ships. The Emperor watched as human vessels appeared from nowhere and tore through his fleet. He watched as human soldiers moved through his base with terrible efficiency. He watched as everything his empire had built was taken apart like a child's toy. "What are these weapons?" he demanded. "Where did they get them?" His military advisors looked at each other nervously. "We do not know, Majesty. The energy signatures do not match anything in our databases. The ships use propulsion systems we have never seen. Their armor is made of materials we cannot identify." The Emperor sat in silence for a long moment. "Contact the Galactic Council," he said finally. "Request military support." Krath bowed. "At once, Majesty." "Surely the other powers will—" "They will do nothing." Everyone turned. A young Vexry officer had spoken without permission, which normally meant death. But the Emperor was curious. "Explain," he said. The officer swallowed hard but stood his ground. "Majesty, I have studied the humans since I was young. I always wondered why a species with such potential chose to be so passive. Now I understand." He pulled up more footage on the screens. "Look at their fleet movements. Their attacks are not random. They are systematically destroying our supply lines, our communication hubs, our reinforcement routes. Within days, our core worlds will be cut off from each other." The Emperor stared at the young officer. "You are saying they planned this?" "I am saying they have been planning this for longer than any of us have been alive. They knew exactly what we would do and how we would respond. They prepared for every possibility. They did not just build a military, Majesty. They built a trap. And we walked right into it." Silence filled the throne room. "How do we stop them?" the Emperor asked quietly. The young officer met his gaze. "I do not know if we can." Meanwhile, on the human flagship Earth's Justice, General Day was reviewing the campaign's progress. Every target had been hit. Every objective had been achieved. Human casualties remained almost non-existent while Vexry losses climbed into the millions. Admiral Yuna stood beside him, watching the same displays. "It is working even better than we hoped," she said. Their entire military structure is collapsing. They nodded, but there was no joy in his expression. This is only the beginning, he said. We are not here to defeat them. We are here to make sure no one ever does this again. He pulled up a star map showing the Vexery home system. The Emperor thinks he is safe behind his defense network. He thinks his homeworld is untouchable. Day's eyes grew cold. He is wrong. The final phase of humanity's plan was about to begin. And when it was over, the galaxy would never be the same. The Vexery homeworld had never been invaded. In 10,000 years of their empire's history, no enemy had ever reached their sacred soil. The defense network around it was considered the greatest military achievement in galactic history. 10,000 weapons platforms, 5,000 warships in permanent orbit, shields that could stop asteroid impacts. Nothing could get through. Pilot Sue looked at it through her cockpit window and smiled. She was young, barely 30 standard years old, with quick hands and quicker reflexes. She had spent her entire adult life training for this moment. Every simulation, every exercise, every long night studying Vexery tactics, it had all led here. Squadron 7. This is Sue. All pilots report status. 12 voices answered, each one calm and ready. Command has given us the green light, Sue said. Operation Reckoning begins in 5 minutes. You all know the plan. We open the door. The fleet comes through. And then we end this war. Her squadron was flying experimental ships, each one barely larger than a ground vehicle, but faster than anything else in space. They had been designed for exactly this mission, to slip through the gaps in the Vexery defense network and disable it. From the inside, the Vexery thought their network had no gaps. They were wrong. Human intelligence had spent decades mapping every centimeter of the system. They knew where every platform was positioned, how every patrol moved, when every sensor swept past. They had found the spaces between, the tiny windows of opportunity that the Vexery themselves did not know existed. 3 minutes, Sue announced. Remember, no one dies today. We are too valuable. If your ship takes damage, pull back. Let someone else finish the job. She took a deep breath. 2 minutes. In the distance, she could see the main human fleet waiting at the edge of the system. 20,000 warships, the largest force humanity had ever assembled. General Day was out there somewhere, watching and waiting. 1 minute. Sue's hands moved over her controls. Their ship hummed with barely contained power. Go. 13 small ships shot forward at speeds that should have been impossible. They hit the defense network's outer edge and slipped through the first layer of sensors like needles through cloth. Weapons platforms detected nothing. Patrol ships saw nothing. The tiny human craft were moving too fast and their stealth technology was too advanced. Inside the network, Sue led her squadron toward their targets. Each pilot had memorized the location of specific power nodes, the vulnerable points that kept the whole system running. If they could take out just 12 of these nodes, the entire defense network would fail. Node 1 is mine, Sue said, banking her ship toward a massive structure bristling with weapons. Target in 30 seconds. Her targeting computer locked on. She fired once. The shot was perfect. It passed through a tiny maintenance port, traveled down a service tunnel, and detonated inside the node's primary reactor. The massive structure went dark. Around the network, 11 other explosions occurred at exactly the same moment. Alarms screamed across every Vexery command center. The network is failing. An officer shouted on the Vexery flagship. Shields are down. Weapons platforms are losing power. The Emperor watched from his palace as his invincible defense crumbled in seconds. Through the gaps in the failing network, he saw human warships beginning to move. No, he whispered. This cannot happen. This cannot, but it was happening. General Day's voice echoed across the human fleet. All ships advance. Show them no mercy. They showed none to our people. 20,000 warships poured into the Vexery home system. The remaining defense platforms tried to fight, but they were designed to work together as a system. Alone, they were easy targets. Human weapons tore them apart one by one. The orbital fleet fared no better. Vexery captains fought bravely, but they were facing an enemy that had studied them for centuries. Every tactic they tried had already been anticipated. Every move they made had already been countered. Ships exploded in silent fireballs across the void. Within 3 hours, every Vexery military vessel in the system was destroyed. Pilot Sue and her squadron watched from a safe distance. They had completed their mission without a single loss. "Look at it," one of her pilots said quietly. "They killed 50 million of us. Now their empire is burning." Sue nodded slowly. She should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she felt only tired. "War is ugly," she said, "even when it is necessary." On the surface of the Vexery homeworld, panic had set in. Citizens who had spent their entire lives believing their empire was unstoppable now watched as alien ships filled their sky. The Emperor's propaganda had always shown humanity as weak and pathetic. Now human warships blocked out the sun. General Day's shuttle descended toward the Imperial Palace. He was accompanied by a small honor guard, but he knew he did not need protection. The fight was over. All that remained was the ending. The Emperor waited for him in the throne room. The ancient ruler stood tall despite everything, refusing to show weakness before his conqueror. Around him, his remaining guards held their weapons ready, though everyone knew they were useless. "Human," the Emperor said as Day entered. "Have you come to gloat?" Day walked to the center of the room and stopped. He looked at the Emperor for a long moment. "I have come to give you a choice," he said. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "What choice could you possibly offer me?" "Surrender, unconditionally. Accept complete disarmament of your military. Pay reparations to the species your empire has conquered. Submit to war crimes trials for those responsible for the attack on Colony Tan." Day's voice was cold and steady. "Do this, and your species survives. Your people live. Your world remains. And if I refuse?" Day did not answer with words. He simply pulled out a small device and pressed a button. The view screens around the throne room lit up. They showed human ships in orbit, their weapons aimed at the planet below. They showed military bases and industrial centers already destroyed. They showed the complete and total defeat of everything the Vexery Empire had built. "We do not want to exterminate your species," they said quietly. "We have never wanted that. But we will do whatever is necessary to ensure the safety of our people. If you force us to destroy you, we will do it. And we will not lose a minute of sleep over it." The Emperor stared at the screens. His hands shook with rage and fear and something else recognition. He finally understood what humanity truly was. "You were never weak," he said slowly. "You were waiting. We were hoping," they corrected him. "We hoped we would never have to become this. We hoped the galaxy would learn to live in peace. We hoped that species like yours would eventually understand that cooperation is better than conquest." His expression darkened. "You killed that hope when you murdered our people. So now you will learn the lesson the hard way." The Emperor closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed in his face. The pride was gone. In its place was only exhaustion. "I accept your terms," he said quietly. "The Vexery Empire surrenders." They nodded once. "Then it ends here." Across the galaxy, news of the surrender spread like fire. Species that had lived in terror of the Vexery for centuries could not believe what they were hearing. The unbeatable empire had been broken in less than a month. By the humans. The weak, peaceful, harmless humans. the Galactic Council held an emergency session. This time, no one was laughing at humanity. Ambassador Croth was not present. He had been captured 3 days earlier, found hiding in a supply depot on a remote moon. He would face trial for his role in the attack on Colony Tan, along with every other Vexery officer who had participated. But the Council's attention was not on the Vexery. It was on the human fleet that was now the most powerful force in known space. What will they do next? The speaker asked, his voice filled with barely hidden fear. Will they demand tribute? Territory? Slaves? No one knew. And that was the most frightening thing of all. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so silent. Every seat was filled. Representatives from every major power and dozens of minor ones had gathered, summoned by an invitation that was not quite a request. Human warships hung in space around the council station, their weapons powered down but clearly visible. A reminder of what had happened. A warning of what could happen again. General Day walked to the speaking platform alone. He wore his dress uniform, decorated with medals from a war that had lasted less than a month but had changed everything. Behind him, the view screen showed images. Colony Tam before and after. The human fleet in action. The Vexery Emperor signing the surrender documents. The representatives watched in terrified silence. Many of them had laughed at humanity for centuries. None of them were laughing now. Honored members of the Galactic Council, they began. His voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the vast chamber. I stand before you today as the representative of a species you thought you understood. You were wrong. He let the words sink in. For 300 years, humanity chose peace. We traded instead of conquering. We talked instead of fighting. We let you mock us, insult us, treat us like something to be pitied or ignored. His eyes swept across the assembly. You thought this meant we were weak. You thought we were harmless. Some of you even thought we were stupid. A few representatives shifted uncomfortably. The Vexery made that mistake. They continued. They killed 50 million of our people because they believed we could not fight back. They were wrong. And now their empire is ash. The image behind him changed to show the current state of Vexery space. Occupied, disarmed, utterly defeated. We did not do this because we enjoy war. We did not do this because we wanted power or territory or revenge. We did this because there are some things that cannot be allowed to stand. There are some crimes that must have consequences. He paused. But now you are wondering, what comes next? Will the humans become the new conquerors? Will they use their power to rule the galaxy by force? The fear in the chamber was almost visible. No, that single word hung in the air. We are going home, they said. Our fleets will return to our territory. Our soldiers will stand down. We will not occupy anyone's space or demand anyone's tribute. We will go back to being what we were before traders, explorers, builders of things instead of destroyers. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembly. But understand this, they continued, his voice growing harder. We will be watching. Every species in this galaxy now knows what we are capable of. Every government, every empire, every council. You have seen our strength. You know it is real. He raised one hand. If any species attacks another without cause, we will respond. If any empire tries to conquer innocent worlds, we will stop them. If any power decides to commit genocide or mass murder or the kind of cruelty the Vexery showed us, they will face the same fate. The chamber was completely still. This is not a threat. It is a promise. Humanity did not want to be the galaxy's protector. We did not ask for this responsibility. But since no one else was willing to stand against evil, we will. He lowered his hand. Peace will no longer be treated as weakness in this galaxy. From this day forward, it will be the law. The speaker rose slowly. And who gives you the right to impose this law? Who appointed humanity as judge and enforcer? They looked at him with something that might have been sadness. No one. That is the point. No one was willing to stand up. No one was willing to say that some things are wrong and must be stopped. For 10,000 years, this galaxy has operated on one principle. The strong do what they want and the weak suffer. That principle ends today. He stepped back from the platform. You have seen what we can do. You know we mean what we say. The choice is yours. Continue as you have been and face the consequences, or learn to live in peace. With that, General Day walked out of the chamber. The fleet left 3 days later. As promised, human ships returned to human space. Soldiers went home to their families. Life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could after everything that had happened. But nothing was really the same. Admiral Una retired from active service and became an ambassador again. But this time, no one laughed at her. When she spoke, species that had ignored humanity for centuries listened carefully. Trade agreements that had been blocked for decades were suddenly approved. Disputes that had seemed impossible to resolve found solutions. Peace, it turned out, was much easier when everyone knew what would happen if they chose war. Commander Jin returned to his ship, but he kept it in dark space, ready to move at a moment's notice. He hoped he would never have to use it again. He suspected he would. Pilot Sue and her squadron were celebrated as heroes, but she did not feel like one. She had seen too much death, even if most of it had been enemy deaths. She took a long leave of absence and spent months on a quiet colony world, trying to remember what peace felt like. The Vexery Empire, or what remained of it, began the long process of transformation. Under human supervision, they dismantled their military completely. They paid reparations to the species they had conquered. Their leaders faced trials for crimes against sentient beings. It would take generations for them to regain the galaxy's trust, if they ever could. And on Earth, the memorials began. A great monument was built on the site where Colony Tan had once existed. The planet itself was still dead, its atmosphere poisoned and its surface scarred. But in orbit, a station now floated. Inside, the names of all 50 million victims were carved into walls of black stone. Visitors came from across human space to read the names and remember. General Day visited often. He would stand before the wall and find the names of his wife, his sons, his grandchildren. He would touch the stone gently and whisper words that no one else could hear. Sometimes, late at night, he wondered if it had been worth it. Humanity had achieved something remarkable. They had forced peace on a galaxy that had known only war. But the cost had been terrible. They had become warriors when they wanted to be builders. They had killed millions when they wanted to save lives. They had become exactly what they feared. One night, President Ho found him at the memorial. "You did the right thing," Ho said quietly. "You know that, don't you?" Day was silent for a long moment. "I know we did what was necessary," he said finally. "I am less certain it was right." Ho nodded slowly. "Perhaps there is no difference. Perhaps sometimes the necessary thing and the right thing are the same, even when both are terrible. Perhaps." They stood together in silence, looking at the names. "What happens now?" They asked. "Now we go back to being who we were. Traders, explorers, builders. We show the galaxy that we meant what we said, that peace is possible, that cooperation is better than conquest. And if someone tests us again," Ho's expression hardened, "then we teach them the same lesson we taught the Vexery." Months passed, then years. The galaxy slowly adjusted to the new reality. Wars became rarer. Conquest stopped almost entirely. Species that had spent millennia fighting each other began to talk instead. It was not perfect, nothing involving, living beings ever was, but it was better. Humanity watched it all with quiet satisfaction. They had never wanted to be conquerors or enforcers or galactic police. They had simply wanted to live in peace. Now, finally, that peace was possible, but they never forgot the price they had paid for it. And they never forgot what they were capable of becoming. On the anniversary of Colony Tehan's destruction, General Day gave one final speech. He stood before the monument, now surrounded by flowers and candles and messages from across human space, and spoke to a galaxy that was finally listening. "You wondered why we chose peace," he said, his voice carrying across the void. "For 300 years, you mocked us for it. You called us weak. You said we were foolish." He looked up at the stars. "It was never because we could not fight. It was never because we did not have the power. It was because we knew what we would become if we did. We knew the darkness that lives inside every thinking being, the capacity for destruction that comes with intelligence." His eyes grew distant. "We chose peace because we did not want to become monsters. But when you killed our children, when you burned our world, you left us no choice. We became what we feared. We became what you always knew we could be." He bowed his head. "And now you understand. Now the whole galaxy understands. Peace is not weakness. It is the hardest choice a species can make. It is the decision to hold back the darkness, day after day, year after year, forever." He raised his head again. "We made that choice once. We will make it again. But never forget what happens if you take that choice away from us." He stepped back from the podium. "Remember Colony Tehan. Remember the Vexery. Remember what humanity can do." His final words echoed across 1,000 worlds. "And pray you never give us a reason to do it again." The speech ended. The galaxy was silent. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, human warships kept their quiet watch, ready for a war they hoped would never come, prepared for a peace they would defend forever. This was the new order. This was humanity's legacy, that the galaxy had finally learned to fear peace.